Monday, August 21st, 2023. Topic: Ketamine benefits and risks for depression, PTSD, and neuroplasticity. Huberman Lab Podcast. Please pardon any visual and informational inaccuracies in this entirely AI-generated video.
The Huberman Lab Podcast, hosted by Andrew Huberman, a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine, discusses the compound ketamine. Ketamine is used clinically for treating depression, suicidality, and PTSD, but is also a commonly abused recreational drug. The podcast will cover the research on ketamine's clinical benefits and risks, its mechanisms of action, dosages, and delivery routes. It will also discuss how ketamine can change neural circuitry and produce dissociative states. The podcast will also cover the topic of neuroplasticity, the nervous system's ability to change in response to experience, and the role of brain-derived nootropic factor, BDNF, in learning and memory. The podcast is sponsored by Roca, a company that makes high-quality eyeglasses and sunglasses. The speaker discusses two products: initially Broke eyeglasses and sunglasses, which are lightweight and designed for sports, but can be worn anytime, and 8 Sleep Smart Mattress covers, which can regulate temperature for optimal sleep. The speaker also discusses the drug ketamine, noting its similarity to PCP in terms of its mode of action in the brain. While PCP is often associated with drug abuse, ketamine is increasingly recognized for its potential benefits in treating depression, suicidality, and PTSD when used appropriately in a clinical context. There's evidence that ketamine may cause a release of BDNF, contributing to its therapeutic effects. The transcript discusses the role of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, in the effectiveness of ketamine in treating depression. BDNF is a protein that supports the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth and differentiation of new neurons and synapses. The transcript suggests that ketamine's ability to induce the release of BDNF may be a key mechanism in its ability to alleviate depression. This is supported by evidence from experiments with BDNF knockout mice, which lack the gene for BDNF and show a reduced response to ketamine. Similarly, humans with a mutant form of BDNF also show a reduced response to ketamine treatment for depression. The transcript also suggests that ketamine may mimic the effects of BDNF in the brain, acting as a growth factor and allowing specific neural circuits to change in ways that provide relief for major depression. This mechanism is different from other treatments for depression. The speaker discusses the effects of ketamine on the brain, noting that it provides immediate relief for depression and mood disorders. Ketamine works through multiple mechanisms, including the suppression of the NMDA receptor, the release of BDNF, and changes in neural circuits. The audio transcript discusses the drug ketamine, which is used for treating depression, suicidality, and PTSD, but also has a high potential for abuse. The speaker also mentions that ketamine can bind to receptors in the opioid pathway, which is why it is sometimes used recreationally. The speaker then takes a break to promote an electrolyte drink called Element, which contains sodium, potassium, and magnesium. The transcript discusses the opioid crisis and the effects of opioids on the brain. It explains that opioid receptors in our brains exist to bind to naturally made opioids, not drugs made by pharmaceutical companies. The transcript also discusses the effects of ketamine, which can bind to various opioid receptors, causing effects like pain relief, changes in psychic states, and even loss of consciousness at high doses. The dosage used in clinical studies to relieve depression was 0.5 milligram per kilogram of body weight. Higher dosages can lead to anesthetic effects. Ketamine affects both the glutamate-related system and the indigenous opioid system. When ketamine is metabolized, it becomes hydroxynorketamine, which selectively activates the opioid system. Researchers are trying to determine whether the relief from depression provided by ketamine is due to changes in the glutamate circuits or the opioid system. It is often used recreationally at parties, leading to a state known as K-holes when the dosage is too high. The transcript discusses a study conducted by Stanford School of Medicine on the effects of ketamine on depression. The researchers found that ketamine, which binds to opioid receptors, can provide relief from depression. However, when the opioid receptor system was blocked using a drug called naltrexone, the antidepressant effects of ketamine were no longer observed. This suggests that the opioid receptor system is responsible for the antidepressant effects of ketamine. The study also found that while patients given both ketamine and naltrexone still experienced the immediate effects of ketamine, they did not experience the longer-term mood changes associated with relief from depression. The findings highlight the importance of understanding the effects of drugs both during and after use. The speaker discusses the effects of drugs like ketamine, psilocybin, and MDMA on psychiatric conditions like depression and PTSD. They suggest that while these drugs can have profound immediate effects on a person's mental state, it's not clear that these immediate experiences are what provide the long-term relief from these conditions. Instead, they propose that these drugs may set off a series of processes in the brain that provide relief over time. They also emphasize that it's impossible to separate the positive behavioral changes that often accompany relief from depression from the effects of the drug itself. The drug is similar to PCP and has both clinical and recreational uses. They mention that behaviors such as getting morning sunlight and exercising are also crucial for recovery. The speaker discusses the effects of ketamine on depression, explaining that it works on both a high level, providing relief from depressive symptoms, and on a molecular level, affecting receptors and neuroplasticity. The speaker also mentions the importance of behaviors such as exposure to morning sunlight, quality sleep, proper nutrition, and social engagement in combating depression. The speaker then discusses the role of neural circuits and how they change when one takes ketamine. The habenula, a brain structure associated with disappointment and depressive symptoms, is highlighted. The speaker explains that ketamine therapy can alter the connections between the habenula and the brain's reward circuitry, potentially leading to an increase in mood and motivation. The audio transcript discusses the effects of ketamine on the brain's reward pathway and its potential use in treating depression. Ketamine lessens the inhibition of the reward pathway, making it more available for engagement through daily activities. However, the changes in neural circuits from taking a drug like ketamine need to be reinforced by specific behaviors to be effective. If a person continues to engage in depressive behaviors after taking ketamine, they may not experience relief from depression. Some people access ketamine legally for depression treatment but use it outside of the clinic, leading to increased recreational use and potential addiction. Conversely, if they engage in positive behaviors such as seeking stimulating work, social engagement, and taking care of their physical and mental health, they may experience relief. The drug can also reduce the output from the habenula to the reward pathway, making the reward pathway more available for engagement through positive thoughts and behaviors. Additionally, it can bolster neuroplasticity within the reward pathway, particularly with connections with the frontal cortex, which is critical for establishing context-dependent strategy. The audio discusses the effects of ketamine on the brain, particularly its ability to improve connectivity and strengthen connections between areas of the brain associated with strategy building and reward pathways. This makes people more sensitive to the results of their efforts and helps them adjust their efforts accordingly. Ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic, causing users to feel separate from their bodies and observe themselves from a third-person perspective. This state of mind, while often associated with PTSD and trauma, can provide relief from depression. The dissociative effects of ketamine are likely caused by an uncoupling of certain brain circuits, particularly neocortical brain circuits. The audio transcript discusses the effects of ketamine on brain activity, specifically alpha and theta patterns. Alpha brain waves are associated with a calm, alert state of mind, while theta patterns are linked to a dreamlike state. Despite its potential for abuse, ketamine has established clinical uses and its perception has changed significantly over the past 10-20 years. Ketamine abolishes the alpha pattern and enhances the theta pattern. The transcript also discusses the different methods of ketamine administration, including intravenous, intramuscular, oral, and sublingual. It notes that oral and sublingual methods result in less active ketamine entering the bloodstream compared to injections. The dosage required to achieve the same effects varies depending on the method of administration. The speaker discusses the use of ketamine, a drug often used recreationally but also legally for medical purposes. They explain that the dosage and method of delivery can greatly affect a person's experience, with higher doses taken orally or sublingually, often leading to a state known as a K-hole or a pseudo-anesthetized state. This can be dangerous, especially when combined with other substances like alcohol or barbiturates. The speaker emphasizes the importance of understanding dosage and individual responses to the drug, and the risks of taking it outside a clinical setting, even if it's obtained legally. They also mention the increasing use of telehealth for ketamine sessions, which carries its own risks. The speaker discusses the potential dangers of ketamine, including deep unconsciousness, death, and seizures, especially for those who are seizure-prone. The clinical use of ketamine for depression and PTSD has increased in the last 5-10 years. They also discuss the different forms of ketamine administration, including intranasal, oral, sublingual, and rectal, noting that the method of administration often relates more to dosage than anything else. The speaker mentions that rectal administration is sometimes chosen to avoid liver damage, as ketamine can be hard on the liver. They also discuss the different forms of ketamine, specifically the R and S forms, and note that contradictory evidence exists regarding their effects. However, they mention a colleague's research suggesting that the S form of ketamine is more potent and tends to produce more dissociation at a given dosage. The audio transcript discusses the effectiveness of different forms of ketamine in treating depression. Clinical trials have shown that the combined senior form of ketamine is the most potent for relieving depressive symptoms, followed by the S form, which is most commonly prescribed. The R form of ketamine is the least potent and effective. The speaker acknowledges that individual experiences may vary. The speaker also addresses the topic of microdosing ketamine, stating that there is currently no published clinical evidence supporting its effectiveness in treating depression. All positive effects on depression discussed in the episode are from studies using a 0.5 milligram per kilogram dosage of ketamine. The shift in perception is due to a better understanding of depression and its treatment. The speaker discusses the effects of ketamine, a drug that can produce dissociation and even full-blown anesthesia at high dosages. It can also potentially cause seizures or death if the dosage is too high. The speaker emphasizes the importance of dosage sensitivity and the impact of the route of delivery. They also discuss how ketamine activates the NMDA receptor and the brain-derived nootropic factor, which are important for its antidepressant effects. The speaker also mentions that ketamine impacts the opioid receptor system. They highlight that ketamine provides short-lived depression relief unless applied over multiple weeks to rewire brain circuits. The speaker emphasizes the importance of engaging in antidepressant behaviors to reinforce the positive changes brought about by drug treatment. They also encourage listeners to subscribe to their YouTube channel and podcast and to check out their sponsors and supplements. The speaker is promoting the Huberman Lab social media platforms and their free monthly newsletter, the Neural Network newsletter. This newsletter includes podcast summaries and protocols in brief PDFs, which provide toolkits for enhancing sleep quality, improving learning and neuroplasticity, and other topics like cold exposure exercise and focused dopamine. The transcript also mentions the monoamine hypothesis of depression, which involves neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. To sign up, one must visit the Huberman Lab website and provide their email, which will not be shared with anyone. The speaker thanks the audience for their participation and interest in science. The speaker discusses the hypothesis that depression is caused by deficiencies in monoamines like serotonin, dopamine, or norepinephrine. However, there is little evidence to support this. Drugs like Prozac or Zoloft, which increase serotonin, can provide relief for some depression symptoms, but only work for about 40% of people and often have side effects. These side effects can include dry mouth, changes in appetite, reduced libido, and altered sleep patterns. Despite these issues, drugs like SSRIs and Wellbutrin have helped many people with depression and even prevented suicide. The speaker then introduces ketamine as a potential alternative treatment for depression. Ketamine, a dissociative anesthetic, was mainly studied for its abuse and anesthetic properties before the 1990s. It is sometimes used in surgeries, and the speaker suggests asking an anesthesiologist about the drugs used during anesthesia. The audio transcript discusses the effects of ketamine, an anesthetic that can induce a dissociative state similar to dreaming. This state is often used in the treatment of depression, suicidality, and PTSD. However, recreational use of ketamine can lead to unpleasant or dangerous experiences due to varying effects depending on dosage and delivery method. The speaker also discusses a preclinical model of depression involving rats or mice known as the model of learned helplessness, which is used to study depression and the effects of drugs like ketamine. The transcript discusses a model of learned helplessness in animals, specifically rats and mice, to understand depression. The model involves placing the animals in water and observing how long they struggle before giving up, which is then used to test the effects of different drugs. One drug, ketamine, was found to prolong the animal's struggle, indicating its potential as an antidepressant. This was surprising as ketamine is an NMDA receptor blocker, and NMDA receptors are crucial for neuroplasticity in the brain. The findings suggest that ketamine may help overcome feelings of helplessness, a key symptom of depression. The transcript discusses the use of ketamine, an anesthetic that blocks NMDA receptors in treating depression. Initially, the drug's ability to increase the swimming duration of mice and rats was observed, which was puzzling as it was thought to block neuroplasticity, a process believed to be crucial in recovering from depression. However, some scientists decided to explore this apparent contradiction. Around 2000, clinicians began using ketamine to treat depression with remarkable effects. This was a time when other drugs like Prozac were not providing relief for many patients. Despite ketamine being a dissociative anesthetic, it was found to be effective in treating depression, particularly in cases that did not respond to other treatments. The audio transcript discusses a study on the use of ketamine for treating severe depression. The study found that injecting patients with ketamine resulted in effects within 10-15 minutes, inducing a euphoric, dreamy, dissociative state that peaked about 45 minutes to an hour after injection. The total effects of the drug were over by about 2 hours. However, patients experienced immediate relief from depression that lasted for several days. This makes ketamine an attractive treatment option for depression, especially for those who haven't responded to other treatments. Unlike other drugs like SSRIs, which can take weeks or months to kick in, ketamine provides rapid, even same-day relief. The speaker discusses the potential of ketamine as a treatment for depression, emphasizing that while it's not a miracle drug, it has shown significant effectiveness in reducing depression, suicidality, feelings of helplessness and worthlessness, particularly in patients resistant to other treatments. Ketamine has also been found effective in treating bipolar depression, PTSD, OCD, anxiety, and various forms of substance addiction. However, the speaker notes that ketamine's effects are short-lived, typically wearing off after about a week, and its use can lead to a dissociative state and potential for abuse, making regular use problematic. The audio transcript discusses the use of ketamine in treating depression. Clinical studies have shown that taking ketamine twice a week for 3 weeks can provide immediate and ongoing relief from depressive symptoms, which can extend for months. The relief from depression is likely due to ketamine acting through at least 3 different mechanisms. One mechanism provides immediate relief, associated with the euphoric state experienced under the influence of ketamine. The second mechanism provides relief in the days and weeks following treatment, and a third mechanism induces long-lasting changes in the nervous system. These mechanisms produce changes in neurochemistry and circuit wiring, enabling ketamine to provide significant relief from depression. The speaker also mentions the importance of understanding depression at a neural circuit level and the role of neuroplasticity in relief from depression. The speaker discusses the benefits of AG1 supplement, which helps to buffer stress, improve focus, energy, and sleep. A special offer is available for AG1, including 10 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D3K2. The speaker then explains how ketamine works, stating it blocks the NMDA receptor, which is crucial for neuroplasticity. Ketamine has a high affinity for the NMDA receptor, allowing it to bind easily when introduced to the bloodstream. The NMDA receptor is an AND gate, requiring 2 elements to be present for neuroplasticity to occur. It binds glutamate, an excitatory neurotransmitter, and responds to unusually high or frequent levels of electrical activity. The speaker discusses the role of the motor cortex and the neurotransmitter glutamate in controlling limb movements. They explain that for regular everyday movements, glutamate binds to its receptor types called AMPA receptors. However, when learning a new motor sequence, such as a specific hand movement, the neurons involved in generating that sequence become unusually active. This high level of activity is detected by the neurons, leading to an increase in glutamate binding to the NMDA receptor. This triggers a series of intracellular processes aimed at making the new behavior easier to perform over time, reducing the energetic demand. This process is part of neuroplasticity, where the nervous system adapts to new patterns of activity. The NMDA receptor controls neural activity and can engage gene expression, introducing new receptors to the cell. This allows the cell to recreate the same patterns of activity without metabolic demand. This is similar to how muscles hypertrophy through resistance training. The NMDA receptor is central to many forms of neuroplasticity. Ketamine, an NMDA receptor blocker, is used to transition from a depressed state to a non-depressed state. There are two types of neurons in the brain: excitatory neurons, which activate other neurons, and inhibitory neurons, which reduce the probability of the next neuron being electrically active. Understanding these two types of neurotransmission is key to understanding conditions like epilepsy. The audio transcript discusses the nature of seizures, which are caused by runaway excitation in the brain. This excitation starts in a small region and spreads out, recruiting many neurons and creating seizure-like motor patterns. The speaker explains that the balance between inhibitory and excitatory neurons prevents seizures. The NMDA receptors, which are critical for neuroplasticity, are also discussed. The speaker then introduces the topic of ketamine, which blocks the NMDA receptor, reducing neuron activity but paradoxically increasing neuroplasticity in brain circuits involved in mood and reward. Ketamine binds to the NMDA receptor on inhibitory neurons, reducing their inhibition and allowing excitatory neurons to increase their activity. The speaker discusses the effects of ketamine on the brain, specifically its role in neuroplasticity and mood regulation. Ketamine, when introduced into the system, binds to the NMDA receptor, blocking the output of inhibitory neurons and causing excitatory neurons to fire in bursts. These bursts induce long-term changes in neural circuits associated with reward, dopamine release, disappointment, and mood, providing relief from symptoms of major depression. The speaker compares this process to how a muscle gets stronger when overloaded in the gym, recovering and adapting to handle future demands more efficiently. The speaker emphasizes that understanding this complex process is crucial to understanding how ketamine functions in the brain. Ketamine induces elasticity in the brain circuits that control mood, leading to mood improvements. It binds to and blocks NMDA receptors on inhibitory neurons, reducing their activity and increasing excitatory communication between neurons in mood-related circuits. This process recruits neuroplasticity, strengthening connections and making them more likely to be active in the future. Ketamine does not induce seizures at clinical doses. It can change neural circuits that generate mood and feelings of well-being. This process, which involves cells changing gene expression and making new proteins and receptors, takes many days. The NMDA receptor is critical for neuroplasticity, and understanding the difference between inhibitory and excitatory communication between neurons is central to understanding brain function. The transcript discusses the effects of ketamine therapy for depression. It suggests that ketamine's blockage of the NMDA receptor may be responsible for the immediate effects experienced by users, such as dissociation and a dreamlike state. This blockage is also crucial for neuroplastic changes that occur over time following treatment. The speaker mentions a regimen of taking ketamine twice a week for 3 weeks, which can provide short-term relief from depression and also longer-term effects. This durability is likely due to neural circuit rewiring. The transcript also discusses the role of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a molecule that can stimulate neurons and make circuits very plastic.